Welcome to the Pantheon.Plus Rewind. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of The Rewind. As always, we thank you for joining us on our ride through the Pantheon's social media atmosphere while we add our takes and the topics that you, the community, are talking about. At the end of today's show, we'll actually be debuting a new segment called Bold Pantheon Takes, where we'll say something completely outlandish that we actually believe may be a good idea, or at least something that should be thought about. I'm ready for hate mail on my take today, but such is life. Speaking of life, how's yours going, Therek? Are you feeling good? And are you ready to rock and roll?
Yeah, hey man, I'm doing well now. It's been a long week. I was a zombie this whole week. Like I had no energy whatsoever, but once Friday rolls around and we've got Pantheon stuff to talk about, I get energized. So I'm ready to rock.
Awesome. Well, if you're like us and you like to enjoy a cold, tasty beverage, grab a beverage and let's get going. This week in Visionary Realms news and notes. Okay, so not a whole lot going on in the VR atmosphere, like direct official stuff. So we're going to stick to just Twitter today with two different tweets that came out and talk about them. Now, the first one I do believe is another repeat. Kilson, I told you, I'm on to you. But I don't believe that we talked about this on any shows because I think this was done quite a bit ago. And if it has been, then oops. But anyway, they said, do you enjoy trade skilling? And if so, what is your favorite trade skill and why? So Drakatak said, jewelry. I might be part pirate. I like collecting gems.
Who doesn't?
Yeah,
Everybody
right?
likes gems. Yeah.
Pantheon Crafters said, yes, and all of them. Please don't make us choose. Lexer says, I want to enjoy trade skills. I really do. They're all just so boring. I mean, God forbid anyone ever tried to put skill into trade skills. That's an interesting take that we'll have to maybe chat about at the end here.
Yeah.
Alicera is a WoW streamer who's going to be streaming Pantheon. We bring her up quite a bit on the show. She's awesome. Check her out. She said, yes, cooking and tailoring are always fun for me, and sometimes alchemy. Nefel, you knew Nefel was going to comment in this. Yeah. Nefel said, why, yes, I do. As far as my favorite, I love it all, but I like making equipment for players the most. Longer answer on the forums and lots more over at Pantheon Crafter. So you got that in there.
Yeah, kind of a double answer in there with the earlier one too.
Yeah, it's tricky. We're on to you, Neff, but whatever. This is your topic. You can go as you will.
I agree.
Mirth, who I have coined the term stop mirthing around with, he goes by Jared Woodhouse. I like how it's reversed, right? He's not Jared Woodhouse who goes by Mirth. He's Mirth who goes by Jared Woodhouse. Yeah.
He's turning it on its head.
Yeah. I love being able to specialize. He says in Albion Online, everyone could learn it all, but most people will focus on one due to the time investment. I would like to see Pantheon add perks and skill the more times you make the same item like Albion. To answer the question, tools. Likes making tools. That's actually a really good one. I played Albion for quite a bit. I actually really like Albion, but I don't like it as an MMORPG. I like it as a relaxing time sink, as weird as that sounds. I remember watching you stream it a little bit, and it's definitely got that. It's definitely got that crafting, that trade skilling vibe going on, right? Yeah. Then it gets PvP, so it's like all the things I don't like, but to do it not seriously, it's okay. We got Grim Hopeful. He said tinkering and poison making because I'm a gnome rogue. LOL. I liked tinkering because you could make off the wall innovative gadgets of utility that you could use creatively in variable ways. I liked poison making because it was extremely useful and synonymous with rogue mystique. I love poison making.
Yeah, and you look at the skills of the rogue, and you look at the gnome sort of abilities. He's gonna love it. If he's gonna be a gnome rogue, this is gonna fit right in for him in Pantheon.
Yep. Zergjerk is hilarious. He put cartograph, map making and writing stuff.
Yeah. As soon as I saw that, I liked that one right away. That's pretty good.
And it's funny because Zergjerk is from the other side of the world, so he'll sometimes the English side of stuff he'll mess up a little bit. It's funny, and he jokes about it. But that was a great tweet. Basgrim says, I don't always trade skill, but when I do, I blacksmith because I'm a dwarf, and there's nothing more satisfying than making your own armor by hand and parading it around for everyone to see. Groznak think that's right. It says blacksmith and furniture. I feel bad because remember when I said earlier in another show, like, who wants to make furniture? This guy does. Bonus.
Kind of blacksmith makes furniture though. I mean, it seems like kind of an odd specialization as a blacksmith, but
steel furniture.
Yeah.
Thrones and stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
Bonus if the game has some nice way to sell crafted items by having a shop. Let's see. A play by Satyr says, various types of gathering skills to make in-game money and helping friendly players with the items they need. Inevitably, you'll end up being able to help a friend make their armor and weapons with that one thing they just can't always find or afford. It's always a good feeling. That's a nice thing to say.
Yeah.
IP Dre says, I love the gathering process first and foremost. Walking around a beautiful land and harvesting the correct materials, as well as hoping for a rare, is satisfying. I also enjoy making armor, specifically heavy. DM Harms says, oddly enough, I remember scribing in EQ2 being the one that I stuck with. I'm usually doing alchemy cooking lately, though. If woodworking wasn't always the crappy profession, I'd enjoy that too.
Aw, man.
That's your
well, that's gonna be mine. I'll talk about that in a second. Okay. Man, woodworking. Come on.
So
man.
Kevin says making boats. I know that was a big deal in Vanguard.
Yes.
Old Wargoat says it depends on the class I take for combat jobs, so I can be self-sufficient as much as I can. So maybe weaving or alchemy or herbalism.
Nice.
Frank says, I love trade skilling. Rogue, poison, and EQ is super fun. Simple to do, fun to apply and use. Carpentry in EQ2 was great because I can make something that could be used, displayed by others. And Final Fantasy XIV has some awesome trade skills with quests, epic tools, outfits, etc. Albert Luna says, I enjoy being able to turn sweat equity into money via the marketplace. Or being self-sufficient to gear myself. The actual trade skilling is a means to an end for me. Dungeon says, I say provisioning, food crafting. Raid food sells really well and it's very beneficial for yourself as well. Gideon Driscoll says, other than being a smuggler in old school Star Wars Galaxy Online, the trade skill system Vanguard employed was hands down my favorite, and I've heard a lot about that. Viv, it goes by Viv Wow, said, whether I like it or what I like depends on the game. I've been able to enjoy fishing, which, by the way, like I had to go down pretty far to find the first person to say fishing, which shocked me.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah. Where are all the fisher people at? I was going to say fishermen.
Don't get me wrong. I hate fishing. But I figured it would be way more popular. But in the Pantheon crowd, it wasn't very popular. People weren't talking about it. That's crazy. Yeah. He also says, I also like mining depending on the game. Actually, crafting is something to do to make money even if you aren't enjoying it much. But sometimes it makes the game fun. Rarely, though. Justin says, I think it's about the process, not merely the trade skill. EQ2 had the most monotonous trade skill system ever. EQ1 was way simpler, but not so mind-numbing. There has to be a fun way to implement trade skills. A couple more here. Clint Faulkner says alchemy cooking, exploring the far corners of the world, hunting for rare ingredients, crafting a huge variety of items, social aspects of helping others with boosts, economics of the marketplace, consumables provide future demands. Emily Tanner says, I adore trade skills, and if it's a good system, I usually end up with one of each type eventually. I like crafting that takes effort. None of those click and done stuff. Give me some counters. Hell, go look at Vanguard, best crafting ever. Mm-hmm. Yep. And finally here, William Jess Farmer says, heck yes to trade skills. My buddy and I took 2 trade skills to make boats in Vanguard, grind gear for trade skills. Never had a better time grinding levels. So it's funny because I've always heard very fond memories of Vanguard, and specifically, even though it wasn't mentioned, around the diplomacy system, which I believe was sort of like a trade skill, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, it was sort of the third sphere, right? There was adventuring and sort of combat. There was crafting, and then diplomacy was the third sphere. It was so when you say it in a trade skilling sense, I didn't think of it as a trade skill. I thought of it more as a primary thing to do. Whereas the trade skilling was more along the lines of the sub crafting professions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So most of the people who listen to me already know that I don't really spend a lot of times in crafting. And I've definitely had my moments. Most of the time when I do engage around crafting, though, if I had to pick one, it's probably blacksmithing for weapons or plate armor. As someone who typically plays a tank in most games, I felt like I usually got the most out of blacksmithing. And at one point, WoW even made it so you got like bonus stats if you maxed a gathering or a crafting position. So like I actually could get more HP as a tank, like a self boost if I was maxed out. So that was, I was all into that.
Yeah.
I was really surprised, as I said earlier, that just more people didn't talk about fishing. I mean, I can't stand it, but I know that most people love it. And I think that like my biggest hang up on crafting, and some people actually like this, which is shocking to me. And I'm not saying it just because I don't like it, but I just really find gathering to be super boring. You often need so much of the materials that you're just running around hitting rocks, collecting flowers, skinning animals, and it just bores me. And there's been so many times when I've said to myself, I'm going to do this. Like all today, I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to level it. And I last like 15 minutes. I'm like, I can't do this all day. There's no way. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately what holds me back from crafting is probably gathering, because there's a lot of people who say, well, you don't need to gather, but it's so expensive if you're not gathering, unless you have some kind of system worked out with somebody. I just feel like when I'm gathering, I could always be doing something better. But that's my take. Therek, how about you?
Well, for me, in terms of my preferences, I've never been a blacksmither. I can't spot a good gem or make a piece of jewelry at all. Can't cook a meal to save my life, in game or in real life. And so I'm sort of left with woodworking, because it's actually one I'd like to be good at in real life. I have some aspirations to actually do woodworking. So when I'm in a game, I can chop trees and I can carve stuff. And like when I play a ranger, which I do most of the time, I can make my own bows and make my own arrows and all that kind of stuff. So in terms of like which profession or which trade skill I like, that's the one. But in terms of the purpose it serves, for me, I think it fits. It's that aspect of the game when you're not feeling social. Like I'm not going to want to every night going to log in and do something group related. And I know and in Pantheon and EverQuest going back, you basically, if you weren't feeling like socializing, you always had something else you could do. You could do some crafting. I mean, EQ is pretty rudimentary, but thinking more along the lines of like EverQuest 2 and Vanguard, it fills the need for that sort of nights when I just want to hang out and do my own thing. I'll talk, I'll chat and whatever with my guildies or my friends or whatever. But if I just want to, I'm not into like organizing a group or doing something that's really time intensive, that's where trade skilling comes in for me. And I think that it serves a really important role for a lot of people in that capacity.
Yeah, I actually hope that I get into it in Pantheon. Like, I'll be very clear that, wow, I haven't liked crafting a lot in other games. Like, I want to do it in Pantheon. I don't know what that's going to look like as a rogue. I don't want to be a blacksmith unless maybe I want to make daggers. So I'm not sure where I'll fit in that atmosphere, but I do hope that I can get into the crafting system in some way, shape, or form. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's like Lexer said, it has to be an intelligence system. It can't just be a stupid, combine, press a button. I like to hope that they've got something unique and something innovative up their sleeves. We talked about Vanguard a lot. It had a good system. EQ2 had a good system too. It was different, and I don't feel like it was as good as Vanguard's, but I hope they do it right. And we've talked about that before, but it can be interesting if it's done right.
Yeah, without a doubt. All right, so let's jump to the other topic here they talked about, which was guilds. Do you like to be part of a guild, or do you tend to run with friends and family solo, kind of putting those together instead? So this was an interesting one. I've also very, very heavily talked about the importance of this, but I'll get to that at the end after we look through some of what the community is saying. And the community actually surprised me here a lot. Let's start with Micah here. Guilds will almost always make a game better. You could just usually need to take some time to find the right one. But when you do, it can completely change how you experience a game. Lexer said, my preference changes with my mood, so a lot. Some days I'll be all about that guild party. Other days I'll just want to hang out with my close friends. Drax says, I've done both to where I've had a character that I'd play with my friends and a more hardcore character I'd play with my guild. Too old for that now, so I'll just be hanging with my guild. Basgrim said, usually my friends and family are in the same guild as me, best of both worlds. Battleaxe Theater said, guilds that become family are the best. I like that. And
there you go.
Yeah, and I can tell you there's friends. I mean, Haya was a guildie and I consider him one of my best friends in the world, lives across the world from me, right? I have so many stories like that from guildies that I talk to on Facebook and stuff that I live again across the world. And it's just, I love that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Zerg Jerk said, I run solo, so I don't really have any friends. And when I meet people, I tend to tell a joke and then they all leave. Example 1. What do you get when you crossbreed an orc and a dwarf? A dork.
No, that's not that bad. I've heard worse. Come on. Why are you running away from him? Like, trust me, that's out of the people that are out there. That's not that bad.
JJ Padaria said, I like being in a guild as it makes it easier to do group content with people that you trust, but there are times where I would like to just go do stuff solo. Typically, friends, family are part of the guild. If they're not, then I'll run with them too. So I guess all of the above. Rykoth says, I like joining or running an RP guild that becomes a game family, so similar to what Battleaxe said. Disposalist said, historically, the guild thing was pretty stressful, political, and a bit toxic. I'm hoping Pantheon will be different and I will be happy in a guild, but I do tend to run with real life friends and strangers just as much. I hope that Pantheon doesn't focus overly on needing a guild. And it was interesting because there was another person who responded who said, it sounds like you just haven't found the right guild yet, to be honest. I've definitely experienced what you've described in a guild before, but I've also experienced quite the opposite, and it can be a very positive thing. Justin says, guilds are a way to tap into extra functionality. They also seem to segregate players, making groups harder to get into as the game ages and the player base lessens. He says, I raid with one toon in a big guild. I go solo otherwise. That was an interesting take, like that guilding segregates people. That's a tough one for me, but it makes sense logically. But we could talk about that at the end here. Stands in Fire says, historically in MMOs, I like to be in a smaller, social, tight-knit guild, even though I spend much of my time doing solo activities or questing. I'm like a mushmouth tonight. Let's see. You need to
drink some more.
I do need to drink some more. Yara-chan says, I usually do stuff on my own. I'm the solitary type in real life and in games. But guilds can be cool for things like trading. Jody McClure says guilds, but the old-fashioned guilds, where it didn't matter so much your gear score, your attendance, or your friendship.
I was just going to say that's right. I agree with that a lot.
Yeah. I don't know. Attendance is pretty important, but they said pass on the super technical damage meter spreadsheet min-maxers. Dear God, they suck the life out of games. Aw. I like spreadsheets.
No.
Dirk Jimbra says, I prefer solo small teams. It's easier to get things done in a shorter amount of time. I also don't like being forced to play with people I don't like, since it's the only way to make progress.
That kind of takes the fun out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah. I don't know. This person goes at Killiswa. Their name is insane. Yeah. It says, I've been playing games over the years with the same guild since 2003. That's awesome. That's what a guild's all about, right? Like you meet a group of people in a game and it's so impactful that it's like, it's your future. I mean, that's 17 years meeting people and playing together and having a group of friends you can rely on to game with. Like, that's awesome.
It's amazing to do anything for that long, let alone a guild. I don't think I've done anything for that long. I mean, maybe my career, but like, man, that's a long-standing guild. Good for him.
You're not kidding there. Asia Zone says,
you're getting some tough names to say here. I feel bad for you.
Yeah, I should probably like pay attention to that when I'm taking clips. Like if I can't say their name, you don't get clipped. Guilds that value quality over quantity. 500-man guilds don't make a lot of sense. That's one, Therek, that like I am 100% on board with. Yeah, you have to have anything. Yeah, you have to be able to have an intimate relationship with the people of your guild. Like you have to know them, you have to understand them, you have to get to know them. When guilds are that big, it's like, not a guild.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good. It feels like you're a cog in an extremely big wheel, and like it just doesn't feel like anything. You might as well not be in the guild at that point.
Yeah. Dave says here, guilds, but not guilds who just invite anyone. So it's kind of the same type of thing. Mad Dingo says solo unless I can find a decent guild, which is pretty rare for over a decade. Like that hurts my heart for him.
That tells you the state of the genre.
Maybe. Aiden McDonald says guild with certain Twitch community. Please don't limit the guild size. I don't know what that is all about. he's smiling about it. Moxie says, I like guilds to have my friends and family in them. And I actually responded to this one as well with guilds are the lifeblood of MMORPGs. People that play in a good guild often play more and longer. Fans build fonder memories of the game itself. So, much like the topic above, this is another topic I've been pretty vocal about. And I was surprised to see how many people view guilds as a negative throughout the Twitter thread. It makes me think that some people try to fit into groups that they don't fit into. And I think that can be a really bad feeling experience. And I think that if people put time into searching for the right group of people and they can find, like-minded people who they can look forward to logging in to see. I just think it happens sometimes we try to put ourselves in to the wrong place, like a square peg in the round hole type thing, right? Like as a guild leader, I had to remove really good players, like people who were in the top 5%. At one point, we had a survival hunter who was the number 2 ranked survival hunter in WoW. That's how good he was. And I had to boot him. And it's because to me, it's not performance that makes a guild great. It's the ability for a team to work together and help the people who need a helping hand, but then bring people to the level of the higher, like having teachers train people to get better if they want it. Having a guild that talks to each other, who shares their life experiences, who can come to each other for problems. That's what a guild is to me. So I've had to tell people hey, you're a great player, but you just don't fit in. I think that there's a lot of guild leaders out there that maybe aren't comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And being able to control what's in their guild. And a lot of times the way you have to do it is when you see something that seems weird, a lot of times you have to make that action then. Because if you don't action it at the beginning, it becomes so much harder. And some people will say, well, that's not fair to the player, give them time to grow. But there's certain things you see about people when they're in your guild, you're just they're not going to be a great fit. So,
yeah. I think the thing with guilds, so I've never had family members that play MMOs. So I've never been lucky enough to sort of be able to play with family members. I do have 2 teenage kids, so I'm kind of hoping by the time Pantheon comes around, maybe I can get them in there and we can be in my guild or whatever. But I did have one real life friend who is, a gamer as well. And we were in a guild together in EverQuest. But that's really the only one. And being in a guild with him was awesome. We had some great times and I got to know the people. He was sort of in the guild first, and then I got to know the people in the guild through him. And it was great. But then I've been in games since and guilds since where I think there's pressure to sort of join a guild right away, right? You don't want to be left out in the cold. I think there's just that natural social belonging, wanting to feel like a sense of belonging, right? So you apply to a guild that, you don't really know anybody, but you think that it sounds okay or it sounds like something you're interested in, but then it's not a good fit. And like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head, being honest about whether something's working or not working is difficult, right? So if you're in a guild and you're just not connecting with the people, or you find that it's not sort of what you expected, instead of addressing it, the easy thing is to just sort of let it go and you just sort of wallow in it for a while, right? So I think that's when you see these negative sort of experiences that you're hearing from the community here. That's probably a part of it. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I've definitely had that experience myself. So it goes both ways. So as the guild leader, you want to address it, but also as the person in the guild, and you just need to be, more comfortable to say, hey, look, maybe I'm gonna move on, and no hard feelings, that kind of thing. So, that would be my take on that.
Yeah, being upset at a guild because the guild's based on min-maxing and hard progression and server first, there's no reason to be mad at that guild. That's the mindset. That's their standard. And the people in there, for the most part, are probably like that. And the culture in there is that of that culture, right? So if you're someone who isn't into that and you work your way into the guild because it's a really popular guild and it's, they get stuff done, well, you're also signing up for the expectation of what player type they're looking for, right? And it might be great to join some famous big guild, but if you're not ready for what comes with it, then you have to take some ownership and have the courage to say, this isn't for me, and go find something. And it's not always easy to find something that fits you, but it is out there for sure.
Yeah, it's a game of patience, and it's a game of, allowing yourself the space to find the right guild and not forcing it, because it's just going to work out poorly if you try and force it.
Yep. Well, Therek, that's all we got from VR this week with the 2 Twitter posts. So let's move forward. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into social media and see what the discussion is all about.
Okay, so we're going to start off this week on the Pantheon MMO.com forums with the introductions because I missed a few people at the end of last week. I didn't get a chance to get them in the notes in time to give them a shout out. So we're going to make up for that mistake now and talk about some new members who signed up. So first of all, Namd said, "Hey, I just pledged. I played EQ for 5 years as a druid with a little bard on the side. I'll be playing a druid and maybe a bard down the road. Look for me in game as Namd, so that's NNAMD, if he can secure it." And the introductions this week are pretty short and sweet, just a one-liner from the next one. So this is from Sparky. He says, or she says, many, many years on Wrath. Your humble chanter Sparky is on board. And they say, hail BOTS if any yet survive. I'm not sure what that's probly a guild.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say Brotherhood of Steel, but I'm like, no, that's Fallout. Like, wrong game. Next up was Onyx LaRue. They had this to say. They say, I always play a ranger or a similar class when ranger's not available. So already looking good. He says, looking forward to Pantheon. Love the team-based stuff of EverQuest and haven't really found that in any of the other MMOs I've played. Here's to you all who love community and being social. So when we go live here, look me up if you need something or someone tracked down. And then lastly, Borgel said, I played EQOA. It seems like we get a lot of EQOA
We're getting
players.
a ton of that recently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because when that was a thing, like, I don't mean to sound mean here, but like PC people really looked down on that when that came out. But I've heard a lot of really good things about it since. And it's definitely in the Pantheon community. It's strange.
Yeah, I never even played it at all. I never had a PlayStation. I've never had any PlayStation, which is weird. But yeah, lots of EQOA players. So Borgel said, I played EQOA until it was pretty much dead. My main was Borgel the Paladin. Home server was FH and then moved to CLW. After I went through WoW and EQ2, but the group dynamics of EQOA were missing, or so I thought. Anyway, just wanted to say howdy. Hope to run into old friends and make some new ones, waiting patiently. So yeah, welcome to the 4 new folks of the Pantheon community on the forums, guys.
Welcome. And Namd, I don't think you're going to have a hard time getting that name. So you should be good.
Yeah, it's kind of unique. And,
yeah.
But you'd be surprised. Sometimes I've tried Therek in like games and like it's like, no, not available. I'm like, what? Come on.
Google sure as hell doesn't know how to say Therek when I try to voice to communicate. You become Therek.
Yeah, when I tried to do transcripts of our podcasts, the first one or two, it came back. I was Eric or Derek every time. So anyway, so over to Reddit. We didn't do Reddit last week, so we're going to give them some attention this week. The Pantheon MMO Sub-Reddit, a good post by Stod. Now, this is actually related to what we were talking about earlier, so it links into it. What he said was talking about making Pantheon feel like a home. So his quote is, want the players to feel at home in Pantheon? Give us stuff to do besides combat. More than once have I, and many of you probably heard, MMOs being called a home by the players. When they switch games, they've found a new home. And I think it's fair. The genre leads itself to those kinds of feelings. What would really help satisfy those feelings and keep player retention high in the long run is that it is the allowance of players to do things besides combat. Of course, the end game in an MMO is always about PvE or PvP for those that like that. There are evenings when even the keenest of heroes need to kick back a bit. I want to highlight 2 possibilities, and he specifically excludes crafting here because we talked about that earlier, but he's talking something about something else other than crafting, which he enjoys. So these are 2 of his ideas that he would like to see implemented. Firstly, tavern games. So like simple card games or dice games are just fun and fit the fantasy setting. Having a chat with the other players at the table, maybe betting a bit of coin sounds just damn nice to me. Many people have fond memories of the social hub games like Club Penguin for a reason. He says these games are all right fun on their own, but the frequent interaction with others is what made them. MMOs should be about that as well. And then secondly, his idea is exploration goals. So he says, this can actually kill multiple birds with one stone. If I manage to get to the top of the mountain after finding the right ways to climb, making the leaps of faith and enduring the harsh cold, what do I get? So reward players for exploring around the world. You painstakingly create and design, which can be a lot of work or not. Just put a landmark up there. And if you're feeling extra frisky, a rare crafting material node. No need for a world boss, which actually takes up development time. This could be attractive to crafters, explorers, and completionists. So now, so he finishes his post by saying, now, if you say Pantheon doesn't need any of that, it should just do what it does well. You're probably right. But I still wanted to get this off my heart and maybe incite some discussion. I really like how he ended the post there. Like, not saying this has to be in. Don't worry, I'm not like taking away from the game. And of course, Pantheon at its core is about group PvE, and that's nobody's disputing that. But stuff like this has a place too, I think. And I think this post, like I said, connects with what we were discussing earlier about the importance of trade skilling in guilds. And I'll give my take on it in a minute, but here's some of the replies from the community. So firstly, Mr. Dirty Vegas said, I remember some of the most fun times were in the EQ Bazaar, watching people gain and lose thousands of plat playing dice. Unix1636 said, if there isn't any of what you mentioned, then a simple /roll gambling casino always works for me. I wasn't an EQ player, but an EQOA player. I do miss those shouts in FP of people advertising their personal casinos with roll. Though it does open up possibility of scammers, but in a game of reputation, just as much as EQOA was, you wouldn't get far having a casino this type if you scam somebody, sometimes even once, and your name was tarnished. Our buddy and guy we don't see very much or not enough these days, your Gatorbait, says, I think we'll all be surprised to see Pantheon will have a decent amount of non-combat and crafting ways to spend your time, whether at release or shortly thereafter. As for the two suggestions, I'm certainly on board with number 2, which was the tavern games, but I've never really understood the appeal of number 1, the exploration goals. I might have that reversed. Actually, I think number 2 was the exploration goals. Number 1 was the tavern game. I wrote it down wrong. Anyway, he says number 1 sounds good when written out like that, but in reality, it's just kind of meh. Dave20394 says, in old school Maple Story 1, which he says was inspired by EverQuest 1, there's a long boat ride from continent to continent. Because the boat ride lasted so long, people would play minigames while waiting for the ride to be over. Maybe it could be something to do while you're waiting for your group mates to get ready for travel. Constitutional Heresy said, I would love to see the return of Vanguard's diplomacy system. So like we talked about earlier.
Hey, there it is. Yeah. It was in the wrong thread.
Yeah, I don't know. It fits into a bunch of different categories, apparently. PM Me said, I'd like to see AA abilities, except unlike in EverQuest, allow for different ways to earn them other than XP grinding, crafting, questing, exploration, or other types of content progression they put in the game. For example, the one part of an exploration AA tree, you could be required to explore so many new areas to unlock an in-game map of the cities. Then the next AA point progression for exploration allows you to permanently uncover areas on the map that you have traversed in the world. You can layer this deeper and deeper and continue on the progression, unlocking specific zones or a world map as you progress further. Monkeyback says, I'd love a card game and a dice game to play between 2 or more players while waiting for a party, or play at a tavern in town. It pissed me off in Final Fantasy XI because it came with Tetramaster, which I guess is a card game, but you couldn't play it in the game. Monsters could drop their cards with different stats quality to add to your collection. Instead of playing for coin, the winner gets a card from the loser's deck. I would love for them to make a unique card game, and to collect cards would be buying various starter sets from NPCs in each town, and you could play most NPCs you meet to collect rare cards along with them being drops from mobs. And then lastly, Donler said, traveling and exploring is definitely my favorite part of MMOs. Seeing a new and dangerous landscape for the first time makes the world come to life. So lots of good feedback there, lots of good responses. For me, I enjoy side games and exploration-based ways of spending my time in an MMO for sure. Guild Wars 2 is what I think of right away. One of my favorite things to do is getting all those points of interest on the map. Some of them were really tricky to get to, and the vista when you got there, like the view was really, really good. But therein lies the issue kind of that I might have with this potentially, is that they tend to be solo activities. While I don't think they're an essential element of what makes an MMO home, which is definitely the community, if they're going to be activities like this, they should require some sort of interdependence. And I think they could fit into what Pantheon's vision is. So for example, exploration, like some locations might require the help of another player, or even an entire group to attain. For the tavern games, make them activities that involve maybe a couple other people. I guess what I'm getting at is just keep them from being like solo, meaningless time wasters. I'm trying to remember in EverQuest, there was that gems game in EverQuest.
Yep.
Stupid stacking.
I was going to bring up gems. Yeah.
I'm glad. I don't really have a strong memory of it. I know it was there, but maybe you've spent more time with it, but it's kind of silly.
Yeah, it felt like the game from Sega back in the day. Columns, I think it was pretty close. Yeah. Gems and columns are pretty close to the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Crafting, like I said, occupies a different spot in my mind. And like we talked about earlier, there's definitely a place for the solo activity, and I think that's where crafting fits. But for these kinds of little mini games or side things. I think they should be more group interactive. What do you think about that, Minus?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer for this. I'm going to be honest. I know normally I just can throw things out there, but the comment that resonates most with me here is that they want taverns to be more interactive, and I completely agree with that. I would love to want to go into inns and taverns and hang out, and that's where you would get to meet people and stuff. I don't know how they do it. I don't know what kind of games would entice people to do it. If it's just card games, even like things like poker or spades, or like, do we have to get super crazy and invent a whole new system? Because I think that would be tough. Like, I love Magic the Gathering, and having like a big card game in where I could collect it from monsters, that sounds amazing. It just doesn't sound super realistic for VR to design another really in-depth game of strategy within their game.
Oh, so, 100%.
So taking things like checkers or backgammon or like little variations of them, dice games and things like that you could just play and laugh and joke around, even if it's just with guildies or friends that you're just hanging out in the, in with. I like that. And I do think that it should be group oriented or multiplayer oriented, even if you're not in a group, like you just walk up to a table and can join in. I like those kinds of things. And I think that having them in a tavern would be really cool, because there just doesn't seem to be games that really harness the spirit of a tavern anymore.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Magic the Gathering, but Hearthstone was all based on being in a tavern in WoW, right? In Azeroth, that was the whole like backdrop for Hearthstone. And, you couldn't play Hearthstone in WoW. Obviously that's like, it's such a big game. Like you say, you don't want them spending their time inventing this whole new thing. But that the idea of that is, I think, where this sort of lands, right? Like getting together in a tavern and sitting across at a table from, a bunch of people and sort of doing that really gives that whole vibe of, it can be something to do when your group just doesn't have time to go out and do a dungeon, or, your guild's doing something or nobody's on that night, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think it would be, like I said, anything that can bring people together and have fun and downtime is well worth it. But I think you could use a lot of standard games that are out there now and transition them a little bit to, like, people sort of know how to play them already. If they don't, people can teach them. And it shouldn't be hard to put like what if you just had war in the game? Like there was a card game, you can go to the table and just play war against people or something.
The easiest card game in the history of card games.
Yeah,
I agree. It'd be fun. Okay, so we will go over to Facebook now. And on Facebook, there's an introduction actually last week as well that I didn't get in. So I want to give a shout out to Guillaume Gagnon. He said on Facebook that he bought himself a Black Rose pledge, which is pretty cool.
I'm so happy that you were the one who got to read that name.
Yeah, I'm channeling my poor French, my franglais, because my wife is French speaking, and I've never been smart enough to figure it out. So I do what I can to get by, but I've got a little bit. Anyway, somebody actually asked about the Black Rose pledge, because if you look on the forums or on the website on Pantheon MMO, it's actually similar to the Perceiver's pledge. So somebody asked why they chose the Black Rose pledge. And he mentioned that his main character is going to be a female cleric in Pantheon. And the robe of the Black Rose, which is one of the perks of the Black Rose pledge in particular, sounded like a better fit for his character. So it's kind of interesting that, you're picking your pledge based on what you think your main's going to be, kind of thing. So congrats to that guy for stepping up. But the discussions, so there wasn't really one discussion I wanted to hone in. There were actually three, and I'm going to condense them all into three sort of comments, because they were all related to the pace of Pantheon's development. Now, this is probably like the most talked about thing in the Pantheon community. Everybody just, there's always somebody asking about the development and what stage and taking too long, So one of the comments was sort of comparing it to Star Citizen. There was another one that was comments about Nathan Napalm's video about whether it's taking too long to develop. And the third one was just a fan asking if Pantheon's still in development, because they just didn't have the information. So rather than go into each of the comments for those too much, I'm just going to sort of summarize three comments that I think were well thought out and based on solid information, and not on the same perspective either. I don't want to just sound like we're all going to say the same thing over and over again. So firstly, Dustin Harms, who actually you talked about earlier in the one of the Twitter feeds, Desrin. He said, both projects are he's talking about Star Citizen. So he says both projects are extremely valid. Star Citizen's development model has definitely changed over the years, but the project is well beyond its original scope. There's quite literally nothing like it in the marketplace. People meme it up in Star Citizen because they can't put it into a box. Yeah, it's the biggest crowdfunded game ever, and it's not done after almost 8 years, not even close, going by the feature goals. They don't take into account the game's design has become ever more than its originally ambitious goals laid out to be. Pantheon is quite different, but still very valid. Their scope has not changed. Their crowdfunding has met the minimum goals, but not gone crazy. Their communication is much more conservative. However, they're also making progress, and I'm confident in both. And our pal, Omega Contagion, our former co-host and good friend, said, he actually echoed Minus. I know you commented on this as well. And he just added to what you had said. He said, VR has stated a few times that the game is funded up until launch. There will be revenue from the sub fees that will allow them to maintain the game and eventually add content, etc. So yeah, the game will come out. People who are pledging nowadays that money is going to make the game come out sooner. The dev team's smaller. It's around 30-ish people last I heard. So they're truly
honestly, that's probably an overkill. You want me to be honest?
Yeah.
Just for people who are listening, I don't think it's anywhere near 30. For me to be completely honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it sounded high to me too, but I don't know. I think probably maybe a little less than that. But anyway, Omega goes on to say they're truly an indie studio pulling off an AA or AAA experience. I know people are really vocal for the game to be done, but in the grand scheme of the game development, it's right on track. 6 to 7 years to get to alpha. Very par for the course for a modern MMO, especially an indie team. If you compare it to something relatively new in the MMO scene, like Elder Scrolls Online, that game took 7 to 8 years to make, and I think $110 million from a AAA developer. Pantheon doesn't have that kind of manpower or that kind of money, so it takes a bit longer. But don't worry, the game will be finished on release. And so here's the balanced perspective, because there were a couple people that had less optimistic views, but they did sort of say it well enough to be I consider it a legitimate point. Ron says, I just can't get excited about a game that puts years between development cycles. Part of me wishes they just stop updating the public with their progress and just let pledged testers know what's going on when they need to know. I stopped following their live streams. I'll get excited again when I receive my email from VR for my turn at testing. And Phil said yes, but only so he's saying yes, it's taking too long, but only because I think they're polishing the game too much for where it's at. I've never seen a more polished pre-alpha in my life. It's about time they're moving on to pre-alpha 5, but I feel like they're trying a bit too hard to avoid the mistakes of Vanguard. I'm still Pantheon patient. I can wait, but do I think objectively it's taking longer than it needs to? Yes. So, good points there. We wouldn't be doing this show if we didn't believe in Pantheon and obviously have, utmost faith in its development process. It's a very public, very long cycle, but this is what it looks like when you follow a game that looks, when you follow a game this closely and as open as they are about their development process. I'm not going to add anything else because I think that those were some good points that were made. And like I said, this is one that we talk about quite a bit. Minus, do you have anything you want to add there?
Just a couple things. Like Phil had a good point. Like I think it was Phil. Yeah, he talked about how like they're trying so hard to avoid the mistakes of Vanguard. That's definitely true. I think that was the heart of the original plan of how this game is being developed, and why they're doing it independently. The other side of it is this, too much polish piece that we're hearing. It's very difficult because it's easy to agree with that. And even I may be tempted in some cases to say, yeah, you're right. Like, because when I pledged to Pantheon, the graphics weren't where they are, but I was fine with it because I saw it as this retro style MMORPG. But I got to be honest with you, I don't look at Pantheon anymore as a retro style RPG because they've innovated so much since then, since like my initial discovery. I think it's going to hark back to all the old stuff. I think, open world, group play, difficulty, community, like all the key objectives are still there. But I think that they are now pushing this game from being a small niche game into being maybe, I don't want to say like a massive, I'm not trying to say it's going to be a massive like mainstream success, but I think it's going to have more mainstream success than maybe I thought it would have when I originally invested in Pantheon and got excited for it. And I think that that's why it took so long to get to PA5 and why they're polishing alpha so much or pre-alpha so much is because they can't afford the negative internet backlash. Like, look what it did to Fallout 76, to Wolcen.
Yeah.
I mean, to The Last of Us 2. Like, negativity on the internet is like a plague right now across everything. And I think they're just doing their best to limit that because of the hype around the game. So I can't fault them. And to be honest with you, like, so I'll tell you twofold. When I pledged, I thought I would be playing or checking out or testing, whatever you want to call it, pre-alpha or alpha, actually, probably like in March of 2019. I thought that's when I would be able to check it out. So it's definitely, obviously we're not even close to that right now. And it's been quite a while. So I will tell you that my original thoughts were I'd be an alpha. Now, the other side of it is even though I thought that we'd be an alpha, I thought it would be a true alpha testing phase. So I thought personally that the game release probably wouldn't be until 2022-ish was where my original vision was, even when I invested and started all this back in 2018. So I thought it was a while off as is. I just thought that if it was adhering to like traditional pre-alpha, alpha, beta, where it's actually testing, that those would be a lot longer. But I don't think alpha and beta are going to be as long now because they're polishing so much in pre-alpha. So it's probably going to balance itself out. And I think it's probably I'm still looking at that 2022 is what I think. And I might be overshooting it, but it's right on pace with where I thought it would be. And I think that's why it's very easy for me to be patient, right? Because that was my original goal.
Yeah, it's funny, you talked about, sort of estimating at 2022 maybe. I'm thinking 2021 sometime. It's funny when Drac does his Pantheon profiles, and one of the questions in there is, when do you think Pantheon will launch? I think everybody picks their birthday because I picked my birthday next year, and I've seen a lot of other people sort of pick dates randomly, and they're like, why did you pick that date? Well, because it's my birthday and I want Pantheon to come out on my birthday. But the thing with dates, like, it's so crazy, this whole the philosophy they have of not giving out dates. And just before we started recording tonight, there was some news on Twitter about New World, right? The game by Amazon Studios, changing their launch date that they gave an August date to May of 2021.
And let's not forget that it wasn't August, it was in June. They delayed it because of COVID. I'm doing air quotes in case anybody can't understand that. It was delayed because of COVID. Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, I mean, and at the end of the day, whatever that game is, it is what it is. But, that's not a delay going from August of 2020 to May of 2021 as a launch date. That's something completely different. That's like, I don't know what it is, and I don't want to speculate, but it's not a good thing in my mind. But again, I'm not gonna go too far with that. So I'm just saying, we talk about it a lot. They don't give dates. That's why, because of stuff like that. So I hope people can sort of get on board with that.
And Pantheon doesn't have that Jeff Bezos money or whatever his name is either.
Nobody has Jeff Bezos money except for Jeff Bezos. Yeah, can you imagine? Anyway, so that's it for this week's community discussions.
Let's talk content creator updates and new additions to Pantheon.Plus. Okay, so let's talk about what content was added on Pantheon.Plus to start. This week was sort of a busy one for us here in regards to some of the content added to the page. But first, I want to get to Nathan Napalm, who made 2 videos for the Pantheon community, both of which you can find right on our main page or on his YouTube channel. First, Nathan put out a video that just screams vintage Nathan. He made a video showcasing multiple patch note songs, which he created as recommendations for patch notes segments for the VR developer streams we see monthly. For those that don't know, Ronick and everyone jokes that they need some kind of jingle. So of course, we needed Nathan to do this. I really hope that they actually give these a chance, but he put them out. You can vote on them. They're ridiculous. It's pure Nathan, craziness, creativity, beauty, whatever you want to call it. So I think everyone will get a good laugh out of it. So go check them out. What were you going to say, Therek?
I was just going to say, do you remember which one you voted for? Because I sure do.
I think it was like the first one.
Yes, you did. The number one. Yes, that was the best one, 100%. So
yeah, the one was good, but it was too long. If it's a bumper, like it can't be long, right? So that was also important. But yeah, it's crazy. It's puppets. Go watch it, guys. It's worth your time. Have a beer, laugh a little. Don't take it so seriously. It's great. So
exactly.
Now, in his second video, he was a little more serious, and you actually brought this up, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but he did have the video said, "Is Pantheon taking too long?" And one of the reasons he made this video wasn't because he has doubts, but just something as content creators that we just hear a lot. Like when, a lot of us content creators spend quite a bit of time talking to the community, whether it's privately or in Discords or in Twitter or wherever we talk. And, one of the things that I answer a lot, and I think he does as well, and Basgrim probably does, is, do you guys think this is coming out? Are you worried? So that's a lot of discussion that we have behind the scenes. So he kind of made a video talking about, some of the people that might be skeptical of the progress, which we talked about earlier, and his take on that whole process. So it's an interesting watch, and he's been following the game for a very long time. So I think he has a really good take on it. Now, nobody else made content this week from the content creators community in Pantheon.Plus. Basgrim had a week off. So we had some videos that were pretty, that actually did pretty well in the community, raised quite a bit of discussion in two very different ways. So let's start with one that was just really positive. Therek, you put out your 4th installment. You kind of hinted at it on the last rewind, the lore of the classes video. Really positive reaction, as always. People love listening to the lore and having a different way to consume it. And I've said that before. It's much more fun for me to consume lore from your perspective, where you're putting everything together in a neat package, or even Chris Kane, who had done a lot of lore videos in the past. I think a lot of people were wondering what's next. And I am too. I don't know, guys. Yeah. He kind of keeps it from me, which is exciting for me. So I kind of like it.
Got it up my sleeve. I haven't really decided yet. I'll let you guys know. I haven't really decided. I've got 2 that I'm probably going to come down to one of 2 different ideas. But thanks for all the comments on the video, guys. I love responding. I respond to every comment on one of my videos that I make. So if you leave a comment, I will respond, even if it's just with saying thanks. But really appreciate those guys.
Yeah. So that was a really positive side. Really successful. Check out his other videos if you haven't seen it. I keep saying this, but if you guys haven't watched his Black Rose Keep video, please do. It's awesome. That's my favorite one you've ever done. It blew my mind. I don't know how you did that.
Next one might be something similar to that.
So. That's cool. I'm excited for that. Okay, so let's move on to the second video, shall we, Therek? A little bit different atmosphere on it. Very heavy. One of our fastest growing videos we've ever put out. Yeah. So this was a conversational piece that I made with a very strong opinion. And right now, a lot of the opinion has been really cut down the middle. And this was a video I made suggesting that a transmog system is very important to the long-term success of Pantheon. Now, I knew this video wouldn't be everyone's cup of tea, and I'm strongly opinionated on it. So this whole system and its importance. And most people relate it to WoW. So that can typically get it dismissed before even watching or listening. That said, on Discord, it was mainly really good conversation around the topic with a lot of back and forth. On Reddit, it got slammed. I haven't been slammed on Reddit this hard for a long time. But the funny part is it generated 120, or maybe not, I think it was on YouTube, but it generated a ton of discussion, maybe 80 plus comments last I checked.
Within the first hour, there was 70 comments. It's crazy.
And it's a ton of back and forth, and there's some nastiness there, but that's, it's what it is. Right now, as of putting this video together, it was about 39% upvote. So still 40% of people on Reddit are I like transmog and I think this is a good topic, versus about 61% of people who were against the idea. Now on YouTube, it was a completely different. Now, obviously YouTube's a lot of people who follow us, who understand, where I stand on these things and maybe don't take what I say so personally, but we had a 67% upvote with the agreeance of the video. We're just liking the video and the concept thereof. But the comments on that are crazy. I think that one was over 120 last I checked, and it's just growing and growing. So it's our highest commented video, especially in such a short period of time. But, it's just been interesting for me because if you guys haven't figured this out about me yet, I have opinions on things and I can get hey, this is where I stand. But I'm not super offended to listen to people who disagree with me. And I'm also not, egotistical enough to think that I'll change everybody's mind or that what I say should be, right? It's not my point in when I make these videos. So it's been really interesting for me, even with the negativity, to really have the conversation, especially on both sides of the argument. And dare I say, this is now becoming more controversial than my discussion on limited action set.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing it's just because the community really hates WoW. I actually started to think if I didn't call it transmog and I called it appearance changing or came up with a different name for it, if it would have been received a little bit better. And I'm not going to back down on that because I'm a WoW fan, and I think that we need to treat WoW fans the same as we treat EQ fans, as we treat Final Fantasy fans. Like, we all sit here in this community and point at other communities and say they're toxic. Like, let's not be toxic, like, as well, right? Of course. But anyways, join in the conversation. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't matter where you stand. It's about conversation. And I think that there's always great conversation to be had in these really hot conversational topics. Like, listen to each other. Like, right now, it's our time to build the community. Right now, it's a time to learn about each other. Like, to learn for me about why someone hates transmog is interesting because I don't have that mindset. So I want to hear about it. I may debate it. I may challenge opinions. I may have strong opinions. I may question people's decisions, but it's interesting to me. That's what discussions are about. It's about like learning about people and about how things work and about how people view things. So I think it's pretty fun. No regrets on my side though, Therek. No regrets.
No, and you definitely shouldn't have any regrets. It was a great video. I think of things like this as sort of like science experiments, right? And the more conversation there is, it's like refining your experiment further and further till you get to the truth, or to get to at least the most grounded or the most rational opinion about something that you can have. And reading the comments under your video was actually really informative for me because there were some points that I hadn't thought of. Somebody said something about it, this is all predicated. It only makes sense if there is no cash shop in the game. And I thought, that's a really good point. Like, none of this makes any sense. And I want to get into the whole conversation about that. But like the point I'm trying to make is that it's that constant refinement of the idea down to its core and what it means. And I think that's how you make a really good video. And I think this one and the limited action set video both showcased your ability to really rationalize and put something into a very clean and concise argument. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, and again, a lot of people who follow us all the time know this, so I'm kind of speaking to the choir, but for people who discover us or stumble upon different content we make, we're not here to toe the line. We're not here to win a popularity contest. We're here to give our opinions and encourage other people to give theirs. That's why we're here. So don't be surprised when myself or anybody in the Pantheon.Plus community has a hard stance or a very strong opinion on something. But I would be surprised if anybody in the Pantheon.Plus community isn't willing to talk it out or listen. Guys, listen, like I'm brash. I have opinions and I want to encourage everyone to speak and have great discussions, but I'm never going to step away from having my own opinions, right? Like, that's important. I think that's what makes listening to us important. Like, we're not just trying to earn likes and subscriptions by just saying what people want to hear. That's never what we're going to be.
No, not at all.
So let's go ahead and jump to what's being worked on the site. So, broken record, but the new article submission tool we talked about last week, Therek, we actually got to testing. It's awesome. We had no problems. The old one was like crashing. There were all kinds of problems. So we're moving forward with it. That's a huge positive step after testing. By the end of this weekend, our beta site where we test these things is going to be able to save the article. It's also going to be able to look into like the editing and approval process. So we're getting really close. And once we finalize this, we've already designed some different ideas on how we're going to showcase articles on the site. We've actually done a bunch of new artwork changes for our class pages so that we can include articles and screenshots and videos and just all kinds of different stuff, the spells in a much cleaner format. So it's probably, again, still going to take a little bit of time, but I'm excited to have that come out for sure, because I think the article piece, like videos are cool, but being able to have anybody be able to contribute a well thought out article to the site to create discussion is awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. And then the other news from us. So we just put out on Friday night the news of our upcoming Thursday Community Matters style stream in honor of episode 40 of Pantheon+ U. So I'm going to say that we are currently proud to announce the following people will be part of this large community stream. We'll have Basgrim, Nathan Napalm, Micah, Lexer, Haya, Def, Militus, Tess, Nefel, Sacred, and myself so far. We may have a couple other people that we're waiting on the final okay or confirmation from, but that list is definitely solidified. And I actually signed up for a Zoom account so I could host it so that we can do the green room still and have, up to 12, 13, 14, whatever people end up coming on the screen the whole time to interact with, and we can still bring the community in. So I'm really excited for this. We're going to be talking about some hot topics where we'll discuss it for a certain amount of time, and then we'll invite people from the green room in to come. And at the end, we'll kind of leave it open. But That's this Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. It should be a great time. It's probably going to be a little longer because that's what happens when you put all of us together. But it should be a lot of fun.
These are always so much fun. The last few have always been a good time. So I'm going to be looking forward to being there moderating and hanging out in chat and hanging out with you guys. So look forward to it.
Yep. So that's it for Pantheon.Plus. And now it's time for Bold Pantheon Takes.
Okay, so as you heard in that bumper, we're going to try something new this week, and it's the Bold Pantheon Takes. Now the wish list isn't deleted, and we're not retiring or anything like that. We just want to keep the show fresh and not be afraid to try new things, because the Rewind as a podcast, it's going to always be evolving, and maybe it's in subtle ways like this, or we give you a new segment or in other ways. But so this week, Minus and I put our heads together and we decided to each come up with a bold Pantheon take. So like a really strong statement, some sort of out there, thought that, probably isn't going to make a lot of sense or isn't going to be too realistic, but something that we just sort of came up with. So, and it's always about community. So if you guys have thoughts on this or on the subjects that we talk about or anything that you want to leave a comment, please do. And don't be surprised to see new segments sort of rotate in and out of this spot as well in future shows. So anyway, on to my bold Pantheon thought. So this is actually an article I wrote a little while ago, last summer, I think. And I didn't publish it anywhere. And I had the idea. Now, bear with me. What if Pantheon wasn't marketed as an MMO? Now, I'm not advocating that we actually change the game in any way. I'm just talking about how it's sort of labeled, how it's marketed, right? I think that Pantheon maybe should think about abandoning the MMO moniker because it's completely out of date. And if Pantheon is really going to innovate and be the sort of fundamentally different type of game that they talk about on their, on the webpage, right on the front page, it says, fundamentally different. It has to reflect this in some way, right? Current MMOs are basically super different from what Pantheon is aiming to be. There are some similarities, but we even have things like MMO adjacent games these days where they just have one piece, but they still get that MMO title. So I feel like Pantheon should try and reclaim this title, right? Or instead of reclaiming the title, right, rather blaze a new trail and get a new genre name. So what if it was something like a collective community world, like a CCW or a CCW RPG, right? Instead of MMORPG. I mean, I know it's kind of silly and it's kind of weird, but there are some advantages, right? Because when you do something like this, you can sort of take a whole new audience and develop it. Like EverQuest wasn't the first MMO. And I think the term MMO actually came from Ultima Online. I think Richard Garriott coined it back in 97. So this gives Pantheon the opportunity to sort of declare its intent that it's not going to compete with the genre today, but it's going to try and stand apart from the crowd, right? EverQuest was an innovation, and Pantheon can kind of do the same thing. It could be like the evolution of the game in name, as well as in design, or going back to that design, but evolving the name. So, long way of saying sort of, break away, break the mold, because they're doing it anyway. So if they're going to do it with the game, do it with the name too. But that's my bold Pantheon take. And you can call me crazy, minus I'm probably way off my rocker, but how's that for a bold take?
No, it's a good bold take. It's a good discussional take. It's intelligent. It probably is something that wouldn't be super,
No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And, there's a lot of reasons not to, right? There's so much risk involved in making an MMO, making this game, they're not going to do something like this. Where we're going to take a bunch of risk and say, well, we're just doing it to be different and then lose the whole MMO crowd, it's just too much risk.
I think just too many letters that what if it's just online community RPG, like OC RPG?
When I was writing the article, I debated a long time what the good acronym was and what it should stand for. And maybe I'll publish the article when the site goes. When we get articles on the site, teasers. Right? Because I do actually explain why collective community world is appropriate, right? It's about community. Anyway, I won't go into it here, but there's a reason behind.
Sounds a little culty with the collective, but
that's one of the things I said in the article. I'm like, people won't like it because they think I'm like a communist or like some sort of socialism kind of thing, right? It's no, it's not about that. But gotta be bold.
Well, Therek, this new segment that we're doing for the first time paints a really good picture of the differences between me and you at times, right? Like you come up with this really thought-provoking thing. You kind of are encouraging people think differently outside the box. Let's talk about this. And my bold take is one that's probably going to get me in trouble with a lot of people. So that's typical Minus, right? Typical rogue Minus in the tavern causing trouble, getting thrown out.
You gotta be you.
All right, so here we go. It's going to be tough to follow yours, but I'm going to do my best here. Here is my bold thought about Pantheon, as if I don't already have a ton of bold thoughts, but let's go above and beyond. So know that. I'm going above and beyond with a bold, really hard take, right? Here it is. Here it is. I think Pantheon is going to be too hard for the classic EQ fan that has done nothing but play EQ for 20 plus years waiting for the next game. I think that most of the EQ fan base, specifically those who didn't venture out into other games, isn't going to understand the modern challenges that they often sit back and look at from the ivory tower in EQ, which at this point is honestly rather outdated. And I'm going to say this too. I think EQ is kind of easy. My personal opinion. I think a lot of people have actually said that, even like Vandrad and stuff. I'd argue that EQ's combat was very dull, especially for non-casters, and that its large encounters were less about player skill and more about having just tons of people attacking and healing. And I think that Pantheon is going to challenge this small subset of players who refuse to see other games within the genre for what they are. Even more so for those who swear off WoW as the devil that killed their favorite game. Yeah, I truly do think that people want a difficult game and team play like everybody. And I'm definitely one of those people. But I think that like group that I referred to earlier is a little jaded. Having only played just like a singular game for so long. Maybe they dip their toes slightly for a couple hours in other MMORPGs, but they're just this smaller segment that just, they only played EQ and that's all MMOs are. And I just think that they know all the ins and outs of those games, and they're soloing in those games a lot and playing in very small groups, and the population's not huge. I just think that these elements, like people aren't used to that, and they're not going to be in Pantheon. Like that's not going to happen in Pantheon. You're not going to have that style of play. I expect Pantheon to be pretty damn difficult, if you want my honest opinion, and not just raid mechanics, but in progressing, in discovery, in every aspect of the game. I don't know what we've seen any MMORPG so far that has a world that's this dangerous. And I think a large fan base of Pantheon definitely understands and wants this. But I think the people that have locked themselves in the EQ closet may be in for a kind of a rude awakening. I think Pantheon's difficulty will also come from properly gearing and building loadouts. So I think that stat numbers, while not very high, there's going to still be a lot of mathing to be done, where people have to like judge what stats they're going to lose so that they can be climated and like what abilities are going to be played off of their loadouts with different gear. And I think that people who haven't played modern MMORPGs for any length of time may be turned off by that or may find that a little difficult. But I definitely think it's necessary when it comes to like planning loadouts and how gear will work with different roles. So I'm going to take all this and put it into just one bold statement. I think the hardcore WoW fan with zero EQ experience will actually be more likely to succeed in Pantheon than the hardcore EQ fan with zero modern MMORPG experience. So how's that for my first bold thought statement?
That is, I like the way you summed it up. That is the definition of, I think, a bold statement. And it's tempting to agree with it. I'm not sure I agree with it, but it is tempting. And I can see why you're saying it. There's a lot of reasons why that could be true, just from the repetition of doing the same content over and over for 20 years, people, it is challenging, but when you've done it for 20 years, it's not that challenging anymore. Yeah. There's a challenge aspect to it and sort of defining what is challenge, challenge has changed in 20 years, right? Challenge has become innovative. There's new ways of creating challenge that people who may not have, like you say, gone into other games and explored the other areas, might be in for a bit of a rude awakening. I'll say that even for myself, as I've played modern MMOs, but not as much as I did EQ for sure. But I say I want challenge, and I do, but there are games when I play and I get frustrated, right? And I'm like, you're just banging on the desk, and it can be a challenge. But you could be right. You could be right.
Well, we'll see. And hopefully, guys, you don't send too much hate mail for this. Think about what I'm saying. It's a bold take. I'm supposed to be bold here. So that's my bold take.
Bring on the hate mail.
Well, guys, thank you for hanging out with us for another episode of The Rewind. It's always an absolute pleasure to set this up, to chat with you guys afterwards about it. And we thank you guys for supporting us as you always do. It's absolutely incredible. The Rewind has become my favorite time of the week. And I love myself some Pantheon.Plus EU, but there's just something different about this. And I love all the feedback we get. So be sure to leave some comments on YouTube. And if you like to listen to this kind of thing on the go, make sure to download it off of Spotify or iTunes. You can even sign up to subscribe for it so you know when a new episode comes up. Therek, thank you so much. I hope that people like the bold takes. We'll see if it's erased after I'm run out of town.
We'll see. No, right on. Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon.Plus Rewind. Be sure to follow Minus and all Pantheon.Plus related content on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube under the name Pantheon.Plus. Also, be sure to follow Therek at Pantheon Therek on Twitter. Keep up to date on all Pantheon Rise of the Fallen information on www.Pantheon.Plus, the definitive source for all media of Pantheon. Until next time.